So good evening, everybody. We want to get started in a moment, so if everybody can find a seat. And before we get into the work of the evening, I'd like to invite up Pastor Lewis to set the mood and the focus for the night.
Good evening, everyone. All right, at my church, when they bring me up, everybody be clapping and hollering, and y'all ain't said nothing. Y'all ain't said, well, that's because I pastor at a Baptist church. And so that's what it is. We Baptist folk, we make a lot of noise. Good evening again to everyone. My name is Pastor B.T. Lewis. I pastor the Rising Star Missionary Baptist Church. I do not pastor the West Side Church of God. I was commissioned by Pastor Binion to come in and have this conversation with you on this evening. So before I pray, there's a couple of things I want to talk about, and then I'm going to ask you to stand if you can and join me in a word of prayer. This is a sacred place. This is a consecrated place. And so one of the things I want you to be mindful of as you have this in some cases, this very challenging discussion, you can have this challenging discussion without becoming disrespectful, without using language that is not appropriate for a place of worship. And then any food and drink you snuck in here need to be snuck right back out. Are y'all still in the room? Okay, so over the last couple of days, we've had meetings and listened more to this whole TCC process. So let me just share really quickly my hope for this evening and the process going forward. I've been here since 1977. I understand well the deficiencies that have happened in Southwest Fresno, downtown, and Chinatown. I remember when the mall was alive and when Chinatown still had stores that we shopped at. And so what I'm hoping for in this process is that we'll be able to get a better, this is what tonight is about, getting a better understanding of the requirements and the process surrounding these TCC funds so that we can really learn how to work together in the next few months to put a proposal together from Fresno that will benefit the most hard-hit areas in our community. Are y'all following me? Listen, sometimes you got to work with folks that you don't always agree with in order to accomplish what you're trying to get done. And this is an opportunity that Fresno cannot miss. We have to form a cohesive team, and we have to do it. And when you do that, sometimes you don't always agree, but you have to be willing to work together. And we have the capacity in this room, in this city, we have the capacity to do great things in our future. Our past has been marred with neglect. Our past has been marred with our city not always seeing to the needs of our community. This moment, though, in time, gives us an opportunity to do things greater and better than we've ever done them before. And I want you to join me in that. I want you to join me in looking forward. Some of us know what the past was, but I don't have to stay in the past. In fact, Scripture says I'm forgetting those things. I'm in Philippians chapter 3 for your Bible readers. Think I don't know my Bible, but I'm forgetting those things, meaning I'm not crazy. I haven't forgotten what my past looked like, but I'm laying aside those things that are behind me, and I'm pressing forward toward the mark of while I'm pressing and I'm reaching at the same. Am I making sense? And so this need right now, all of us can stand up and talk about what happened in the past. But let me tell you, we're going to benefit much greater if we talk about what we can do, what we can do, how we can work together and move this thing forward in the future. Fresno I wasn't supposed to talk this long. Let me say, Fresno has remember this when you're in this meeting. And I want you to ask every question you got, because I want everybody in here to leave with clarity. Fresno has an opportunity tonight. Ashley Swearingen and her administration began a ball rolling, and Mayor Brand and his administration picked up the ball, and the ball is still rolling. And those administrations fought and got Fresno an opportunity that nobody else in California has. Nobody else in California has this amount of money on the table. And so we need to do our best to put our best Fresno foot forward. Y'all can fight in the alley after it's all over. But right now, we need to do our best to work together and form a team that nobody else in this state can compete with. Am I in the room? You're in the room here. Okay. All right, so let's pray. God, we are grateful for the people that you have assembled in this place. We are mindful that this place has been consecrated for your purpose and for your glory. We are thankful to Pastor Paul Binion and the members and the staff of this great church, Westside Church of God. We are thankful, God, for their hospitality. Master, in the name of Jesus, we pray now that this meeting will produce an outcome, God, for this city that has never been experienced before. God, we're looking for greater things. We're looking for hope that will bless every area of our city, especially Southwest Fresno, especially Chinatown, and especially our downtown area. In the name of Jesus, we pray. And if you know it, say hallelujah. Hallelujah. Amen. Amen. Now we're going to bring up Fresno's finest mayor. Mayor Brand has reached out to our communities. He has shown himself friendly in various areas of our community. And so he has invited us to tables that some of us have not been at before. And he has welcomed us into decision-making places in our city. And so we want to invite the mayor of Fresno, Mayor Lee Brand, to come and address you.
It's always hard to follow this guy. First, I want to welcome all the residents and the community groups for being here tonight, for being part of this long process of the TCC. I want to thank our former Mayor, Ashley Swearingen, for her work in the governor's office. Give her a big hand. We wouldn't be here if it wasn't for her. To put Fresno at the top of the list on getting $70 million. And just briefly, my family has deep roots in this community. My grandparents came in 1915, immigrants from Italy. I'm a third generation. I grew up as a poor kid on McKenzie Street in Southeast Fresno. I'm a homeboy. And I never forget where I come from. And I was elected last November to be the mayor of all of Fresno. And that really means a lot to me, and I intend to be the mayor of all of Fresno. And Fresno, you mentioned it briefly, the narrative for Fresno, the definition of Fresno has been the city of poverty, the city of high unemployment, high crime, underachieving school. I want to change that narrative, and I think we have a good basis already started. We've got Ulta and Amazon, 3,000 jobs coming to Fresno next year. Can I get a little clap on that one? The city is now implementing the 2035 general plan. This 2035 general plan focuses on revitalization and rebuilding older neighborhoods, and that's what we're doing here tonight. City of Fresno financial condition, thanks to Mayor Swearingen, has dramatically improved. We're no longer on the junk bond status. We're A+ rating. We've got a $25 million reserve. We have a fully funded pension system. There's a lot of hope and a lot of promise for the city of Fresno. And tonight we're here to talk about the TCC funds. And for years, Fresno has always been at the bottom of every list. We're in the top in terms of needs of public safety, education, infrastructure, and we never seem to get the money from Sacramento and in Washington. But today we're talking about getting $70 million, actually $100 million when you count the match. So it's really important that we do what we have to do to be successful. and there's things we have to do in terms of collaboration. We have a very diverse group here, and we have, everything I've been to a couple meetings, everything I've heard from everybody has been a legitimate issue. But it's not about, where we're going to go there. It's going to be about what the final vote's going to be that goes to Sacramento. And this program, by the way, put together by Governor Brown, is one of the most innovative programs. There's nothing like it in the world, is cap and trade. So we're going to be one of the first programs to stay out. What we do here is going to be having the eyes of the nation upon us. We have to make this successful. And one thing we have to do is we have to find a way to leverage the dollars. If we have $100 million, we need to get at least a 1-to-1, at least another $100 million, or maybe $200 million, have $250 million will transform the city of Fresno. And to do that, it's going to be a tough process. And really, in the end, the final measure of success is going to be, what does this area look like 5 years from now? If we come back in 5 years, and this is a bustling, vibrant, growing, exciting area of Fresno, then we've done our job and we've proven that Governor Brown had the right program. If we come back in 5 years, we have the same basic setup, nothing going, then we failed. So it's really important tonight, and as we go forward, that we find the right mix, the right formula to move this city forward. There's be some compromise along the way. There's a lot of voices out there. I promise in the end I'll be fair and I'll make the right decision to move this city forward. Thank you for having me.
Thank you, Mayor Brand. So I'm H. Spies, and I'm the Director of Strategic Initiatives in the Mayor's office. I get to work with Mayor Brand. And this is Danielle Bergstrom. Danielle is Director of Policy for the Central Valley Community Foundation. The city and the Central Valley Community Foundation are partnering together on this process. And it is a process, let me tell you. It is a challenging, awesome, incredible process. And aren't we glad that we aren't in purgatory tonight? Right? Last meeting last week. Who was at the meeting last week? Raise your hand. I just want to thank you. Give yourselves a hand for even being here. I mean, when you go to a place that you have to get a key at the front desk in order to go to the bathroom, guess what? That's a problem. When you go to a place that doesn't have air conditioning in this weather, that's a problem. When you go to a place that has only enough water to get you through half the night, that's a problem. When you go to a place that doesn't have a good, thank you, Tracy, that doesn't have a good PA system, that's a problem. All those problems came together, and I want to tell you that we're sorry for that. We're sorry. And we're grateful that Pastor Binion and Westside Church of God opened up their doors and made this possible, because we have all those things that we didn't have. We moved from purgatory towards heaven. Now, if you brought any food or drink in here, you might be headed to the other place very quickly. So you got to be careful about that. But we just wanted to say, glad you're here, and thank you for coming.
Thank you, H. I am with a community foundation, and I just wanted to say this is a completely new type of process for Fresno. I think many of us have never been involved in a participatory grant writing effort before, because that's what we have on our hands. We have $70 million coming to Fresno, but we all collectively get to write the grant for what that money gets spent on. And so this is going to be new, it's interesting, it's different. It's going to have a lot of quirks along the way, and we have invited you all to really join us in helping shape that process going forward, and we're so glad you're here, and we hope you continue to come.
So, you heard the mayor say that this is a major priority of his administration. And you heard him say basically that he wants to see the results of this maximize three things. Maximize collaboration. We've had some difficulty along the line in this process. Why? Because there are questions that need to be asked, and there are relationships between communities that need to be forged, and there are decisions that need to be made. And whenever $70 million is on the table, that takes a lot of energy. And he's not afraid of that. He knows that if we do this as a collaborative process, that it's going to end up setting in motion a process of development that connects downtown, Chinatown, and West Fresno for the next several years. We do this right, and that's the other thing he wants to maximize, is leverage. we do this right, and we can leverage philanthropic dollars, other federal, state funding, and other funding in the years to come. So he's very committed to this. We're committed to this. And just so that you know, and you'll see this tonight, but just to give you a little heads up, the planning area for this means resources for downtown, Chinatown, and West Fresno. So River Park was mentioned a lot last week. You will see tonight that River Park is not on the map. The map is very specific. And as you see that tonight, I think that you'll be satisfied with the fact that we are focusing where we need to focus. And by the way, we're focusing in a way that the state calls us to focus based on the guidelines.
Thanks, H. We want to use this time to this process to build trust. Many of you in this room, but not all of you in this room, know that there was a steering committee formed previously that was appointed by Councilmember Baines, that was staffed by my organization, the Central Valley Community Foundation, to help shepherd the funds that are coming through this process. And as a steering committee and as a staff, we ultimately decided, because of so much interest in the program and the high level of concern about making sure that these funds are spent in a transparent way, in a way that builds trust in our community and really heals a lot of the division that's been there and really acknowledges a lot of the disinvestment that's been seen, especially on the west side in Chinatown, that we wanted to really open up the process to folks in the community to really join us in that. So I'm just going to say that we're here to build trust, and that is our intent up front.
And when you have a history where you've got a portion of the community that has been systematically disenfranchised, redlined, neglected, and cut off, you aren't going to build trust quickly. Trust has to be earned. And in this process, it has to be earned every day. And if we get this funding after 3 years of investment, then we'll have the chance to stand together and look back and hopefully say, we built trust. Now, it's my privilege to introduce to you the person that that we've asked to facilitate this. Steve Cancion is somebody that works all over California in communities just like ours. He has been chosen for a couple of reasons. He gets public process, he's got a thick skin, and he knows how to help a group get to their final destination. He's done that with 2 other previous plans. The Fulton Corridor Plan, that was a publicly engaged community process here, and also the Southwest Pacific Plan. He's got a great track record in our town and across the state. Let's welcome Steve Cancion.
Thanks. Thank you very much, H. Thank you so much, everyone, for coming tonight. Before we get into the meat of the work, I want to make sure that everything's working well. So first, how's the level of volume? Can everyone hear well? Okay. Then I want to ask our 2 translators to come up. And we want to make sure that everybody and anybody who speaks primarily a different language has the translation they need.
Sí, buenas noches, good evening. My name is Lourdes. Para los que están aquí que hablan solamente español, si pueden levantar su mano para yo poder identificar dónde están. Ok, excelente. Si tienen cualquier cosa, no me entienden, levanten la mano, así yo puedo pedir que los oradores se detengan un poco, porque usualmente se les olvida que estamos traduciendo. Just asking. ¿Sí? Y que también tienen la libertad de hacer preguntas, o déjenme saber inmediatamente para poder yo pedir el piso y traducir lo que están expresando, ¿sí? Just wanted to make a clear note for all our presenters and also the public when you are speaking. I know it's a passionate issue, but don't forget that we are trying to translate. I think that if at this moment when you heard me in Spanish, you're like, oh, she's going too fast. Guess what? It happens in English too. So breathe, breathe, give your thought, and give us a chance in between coming back and forth so we could translate fairly. Thank you, Steve.
nhớ trong xã hội mình chỉ cái tin này cho phong như trong xã hội này cứ to mà nó cũng lúc bây giờ lo xong cũng giờ tụi muốn xài lửa trong này xã hội do hai tiếng này lên từ họ xã tông cả cái xài lửa nó là thằng này họ tới sáng đầu là mỗi luôn đó nó trong này luôn thầu là hai luôn nó chỉ có thể lịch xài tao trong này ở trong đó.
So in addition to translators, we have other staff here tonight to help us have the most effective meeting possible. Laura, if you can stand for a sec, is our problem solver. If during the meeting there's any problem that isn't being solved, find Laura, she'll be right there and ready to help. We also have a couple ushers and mic handlers because we have mics to pass around, Michael and Miguel and Lupe, and when we're at points of discussion, they'll be out with mics. We also have several note takers. Shelby will be taking notes of everything that we're discussing. If you want to speak, we'd ask that you raise your hand with your yellow card with your name on it. And if you haven't put your name on it yet, please do, because then Michael's going to write your name on the speakers list. And he won't be able to recognize everybody or see everybody unless you hold up your yellow card with your name on it. All right. And then we have several greeters outside. So if you're looking for bathrooms, food, childcare, you go out the main doors, they'll be ready to help you with that. All right. Any questions about facilities, materials, anything? So the bathrooms are straight out the door to the right. And we don't need a key. Good question. A question from no keys, and they're very beautiful. They're actually the nicest public bathrooms I've been to in California. Thank you to the pastor. Yes. Okay, good question. Any other questions about facilities? Then if not, importantly, ground rules. To follow the pastor's call and have the most respectful, positive meeting, we want to have shared ground rules. So let's create them together. Please call out suggestions. What would you ask everybody to do so we can have the best possible meeting tonight? Anyone have a suggestion?
One person at a time.
So,
Respect the other one's time at the podium.
so one person speak at a time and respect the other person's time when you're speaking. I see in the back. Craig, go ahead.
Sí. Steve, translators cannot hear the questions. Could we
Okay.
wait till they get the mic, please?
Yes.
Thank you.
Try to get a wide variety of perspectives, not just extroverts like some of us that like to stand up and talk, but also people that aren't talking to get more engagement.
Yep, great. Other suggestions on guidelines for a positive meeting?
You should never give me a mic. I'll start singing the Love Boat. Clear and concise answers, and where you find those answers in policy, and or who do you talk to find the answers?
Excellent. Other suggestions, and I'll throw out one because we also need the tactical ones. I'd ask no one to speak for more than 30 seconds, and if you do speak for more than 30 seconds, I'll raise up my cell phone to say you have. And the reason is we've got almost 300 people here. If everybody spoke once for 30 seconds, that would be 2.5 hours, right? So we want to share the space. So if each time you speak very succinctly, everyone will get a chance, and then it can come back around to you. But realize, with this big of a group, we all have to be succinct. Other suggestions?
Okay, so as an educator in the room, hi everybody, I'm Carol Goldsmith from Fresno City College. As a long-term educator, I would remind everybody when we were in class that we all respect one another, withhold judgment, and know that we're all trying to come from the same place to get the right answer.
Great. Other suggestions? Over here?
No person speak on the same subject more than once.
Assume good intentions.
Excellent. Any other guidelines before? Listen. Yep. Turn off your cell phones. Beautiful. No texting. Any other suggestions? All right. So if we can actually abide by all of these, we'll have an excellent meeting. And I know it's not easy, but let's do our best. And then as we go meeting to meeting, we'll add additional ground rules. So then just lastly, I want to turn to our agenda, which, because it's very clear and straightforward, we haven't printed it, we just have it up on screen. So our number one primary objective is to talk together about the Fresno Transformative Climate Communities process. And that is because, as Danielle said, this is our steering committee. We're a deliberative body, right? This isn't a town hall. This is a group of people who are going to come together, as we'll talk about in this meeting, and make decisions together. So we really need to get prepared. We need to all have a common understanding of what we're going to do here in Fresno. So that's the first, really 60% of the meeting. Let's make sure we're all on the same page on what we're doing. And then the second key portion of the meeting is we all need to be clear on what the state intends. What does the state want? The things we don't control that we need to respond to. And so that will be the second portion of the meeting where we talk about the project area, what's eligible, what kinds of projects can be proposed. And then finally, next steps. All right. Any comments or questions on the agenda? Sir? So the question is, can we... So I'm just going to repeat the question, and was, can we clarify the boundaries? Because they have appeared to change and it's not clear. Yes, definitely, and that would be the primary focus under the item project area and eligibility. And we'll have a series of maps which you all have copies of, and we'll go over them in detail. Any other questions to make sure the right stuff is on the agenda?
Where does one obtain copies of the map? Because I never.
So they should be on your seat. Every seat should have a copy of the PowerPoint, which has copies of the maps. Yep. Yeah, no, good question, because we haven't got to that. Any other questions on the agenda? If not, let's jump in. It's always okay to ask additional questions. That's the only way we're going to really learn to work together as a group. All right, so with that, we want to move on to the first portion, which is the roles in Fresno TCC. So this is a large enough process. This is a large enough process that we can't just say, oh, Danielle's the coordinator, and I'm facilitating, and H is representing the mayor, and let's do stuff, right? This is much more complex than that. So we want to now explain each party and then stop after each explanation and answer all questions about what that party does, and then we'll go to the next one, so everybody has clarity on the layers. So for the first layer, Danielle is going to explain our funder, the State Strategic Growth Council.
So, many of you know we have $70 million coming from. Where is that money coming from? It is State of California money. It is the California Strategic Growth Council. Many of you have attended the workshops that they have been holding in Fresno throughout this year. I think they've had 3. I'm going to say 2 or 3. So at the end of the day, like I said earlier, this is a grant writing process. $70 million has been set aside for the city of Fresno, but how that money is supposed to be spent is still undecided, and so we are here to collectively work on writing the proposal for that money. But at the end of the day, the state makes the final decision on how the money gets spent. And what we will be talking about in the later half of this agenda are the criteria that the state has set in terms of how we decide which projects can be considered for funding.
So questions about who's funding this and where the money comes from, and please give our mic runners a chance to run to you. So Lupe right over here, and then who's next so Miguel can find you.
I just wanted to clarify, if you would please, when you say the state, what entity within the state?
The California Strategic Growth Council.
Okay,
Yes.
CSG.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Maybe Strategic Growth Council, you can't tell who they are. So what part of state government, who do they work for?
SGC is an interagency council comprised of the heads of many of the governor's appointees of many of the state agencies.
Other questions about where who's funding this? Any other funding questions? Am I missing anybody? Okay, so that's clear where the money's coming from. So now, really importantly, what's our role? Our role meaning as the Community Steering Committee. As Danielle said, there was a previous steering committee, an appointed committee of 35, 40 people. That's not who's here tonight, because city leadership made a critical decision that this was too important to just have that small of a group make those decisions. So imagine we're actually a group of people sitting around a table who are going to work together making some very complex decisions. Now, there's too many of us to sit around a table, so we're in a room more like a Congress. But our role is fundamentally to rank and evaluate all the proposed projects, and then as a group, refine, develop, and approve a package of integrated projects that meet all the state guidelines. And that does sound like a job that you would give to a small committee, but again, this is too important, and it affects everyone's communities in too many ways. We can't let a group of people behind closed doors do that job. All right, so our job is to make those difficult decisions. So a couple questions, and I want to answer them. One is, why us? Well, us because hopefully in the room the people who are going to be impacted by these monies, or impacted if they're spent wrong. So if there's anyone you don't see in the room, please have them come. Next, who's a member? So membership is decided by participation. When it comes time to vote, if you're a resident of downtown, Chinatown, or Southwest, you have to have come to half the meetings. That's why we're taking careful attendance. If you work or own property in those areas, yes, you have to come to 2/3 of the meetings. So we're welcoming workers and people on property, but they have to participate even more, because we want to make sure that first and foremost it's residents. So just to get a sense, how many, if you could stand up, how many people here are residents of Southwest, downtown, or Chinatown? Please stand up. That's great. Excellent. How many people work or own property in those three neighborhoods? And it's great that it's many of the same people. Excellent. So you see, thank you very much. We have the right people here in the room, but if you think of people who are going to be impacted who aren't here, please remember to invite them. Next question, and then I want to take yours. How are we actually going to decide? Importantly, we're going to decide by 2/3 vote of eligible members. And the reason 2/3 is because we need to come together as a community. The last thing we want is a 50% plus one split vote. So we're using a high bar, the same bar that the city council uses and the state government uses for critical decisions. Lastly, how are we going to decide? We've got 250, 300 people. In our future meetings, we'll work together in small groups. We'll have significant staff that will support us. So everyone, just like a congressperson where there's 435 people in Congress, you'll feel like you have the information you need and you have the opportunity to deliberate before you vote. So let's take questions on our role, who we are, how we do our work.
I'd like to know who is at our committees representing us downtown that was appointed through the city council's office. If they're here, I'd like to see who they are.
So who's representing the council?
It's on this committee that you're talking about.
So pardon me if it wasn't clear. This committee is us.
Right, but you say that there was some city council person, that appointed some people.
So there was, pardon me if I wasn't clear, in the past, that committee no longer exists.
Okay, so there is nobody in the committee right now representing Southwest?
No.
Or Chinatown, I should say.
No, pardon me, I wasn't clear enough. So in the past, there was a committee that was appointed by the councilman. That committee was dissolved and replaced by this group as an acknowledgement that this process needed to be led by a fully inclusive group of residents, workers, and property owners.
So there is no committee right now?
There is a committee. You're here.
Right. No, I understand that, but I'm saying there is not a group.
There's no appointed committee.
Okay.
But be clear, there's definitely a committee, and we're all responsible for acting like committee members. Okay. We're not at a town hall here. We're at a committee meeting, right?
Thank you.
Kitty?
I also translate engineer. So the appointed steering committee has been dissolved, and the creation of the community committee has come forth.
Yes. Well said. Thank you. And good. I'm glad people asked, because this is unusual. But I want to recognize in my over 3,000 meetings in the last 3 decades. I've never seen a city do this before. Start something and realize, okay, wait, we didn't get that quite right. We're going to go ahead and change it, and that's really significant.
Just a point of clarification, in the meeting earlier today, HB said Oliver Baines is chairing this larger committee. So
Oliver happens to be on vacation this week, but Raymond is here to represent the councilman and make sure he hears everything that happens. The councilman will be at all future meetings to function as the chair. Other questions?
I think he also has a speaker list line. But can you just clarify who is going to be the official submitter of the proposal?
Steve, I'll take that one. What we missed in this, yes.
There you go.
The city. So the guidelines from the state require that there be a public entity that makes the proposal, and that the proposal be made up of a number of projects. The city has stepped up, and there's some really good reasons for that. Number one, that whoever gets this money, the actual funding is done on a reimbursement basis. So there has to be some capacity there in terms of cash flow. Number two, there has to be a match. And so this $70 million has to get matched by $35 million. And then number three, the organization that applies has to have capacity to do large projects, especially like public works projects, et cetera. So this would be a good time for me to do my little piece, and that is that the mayor has embraced that. And not only that, but like Steve said, the mayor has embraced this very unique process. This process will result in recommendations to the mayor. The mayor will approve those recommendations or not, but chances are with this type of level of investment, the mayor's going to approve those and then has to take those to the city council. The city council then approves it, and then we put it together in a proposal. The mayor has asked me to be his point person to this process, but that almost means nothing when you look at the level of work that it's going to require to assist folks in developing their projects and to prepare those projects and then to do various provide various services in terms of technical assistance with the state. We've got we've got city staff that are meeting weekly and have been for a number of weeks to prepare to serve this process. So they're behind me. There's a whole group of very talented and capable people that are ready to serve this process.
You can tell I'm excited about the role of the Community Steering Committee, so I skipped right over the city. Sorry, city. I tend to do that. I put the community in front of the city, but my apologies. So let's take questions on both the role of the Community Steering Committee and the role of the city, because I say we want to layer them on, and it's working. Our list is working. So Bob, who is Bob? Sorry, we should. I'm not. We're not. We should follow our list. We weren't before. My apologies.
The eligible area is very big, much bigger than 5 square miles. I live in near Belmont, at the edge of the eligible area. When the 5 square miles is drawn, my block is excluded. Am I still allowed to participate in the process, even though I don't live in the project area?
Yes. So. Excellent question. Just to make sure that folks are clear, we are starting, and we'll talk about it on the map, with a area that's larger than 5 square miles where we're going to be looking for projects. But when we eventually put it in an application, we've got to draw a tighter line that can be no more than 5 square miles. In terms of participation, everybody in the eligible area would always be welcome to participate. So, because we have to follow the state guidelines and eventually draw a 5 square mile map, but if your corner of Southwest isn't in that map, doesn't mean you are still a participant, because that map will be a technicality for the sake of the application. Henry?
Just a quick question on the voting criteria. One is who established the criteria based on number of meetings attended, depending on where you live or what you own. But number two, with the number of people that I saw here, it just seems to me that one person, one vote. If they live in the area or if they have a business in the area, whether they come to a meeting or not, they should be voting or allowed to vote because they're invested in the area where this money is going to be spent. So I like for this group to talk about that and at least come or leave with an understanding that it's one person, one vote, whether you come to meet or not, if you live in the targeted area.
And so to answer the first part of the question, and then we can definitely take other comments on what the best approach is. So we picked up this process from the Southwest Specific Plan process, where we had an open steering committee, but in order to participate and vote, you had to consistently come to the meetings. And the notion is that those who come consistently show the commitment and will develop the level of understanding to make quality decisions for the community. And that what you don't want to have is a large number of people come to the final voting meeting and make a decision if they haven't been participating. So that's the notion of to keep the door totally open, but define it by sweat equity. And if you come, it's open to everybody, but you have to come consistently. So definitely welcome other thoughts on that as we go down the list. Marshawn?
One thing that I wanted to, get a little bit more understanding of was the multiple organizations and stakeholders, that's going to be the collaborators or, part of this process, because as you said, it was a grant writing process, and most people are not understanding of who is going to be the lead applicant or the co-applicant that is also going to be working with the public agency. Have you guys decided a plan on how you're going to identify and also qualify those agencies that can work with this program here that you're putting together?
I'll take that question. We're going to cover the project development process in just a few minutes, where we'll go into that in a lot more detail. So if you don't mind, if you could wait just a few minutes, we will definitely get to that question.
So just to make sure we're layering on levels of understanding, we have our funder, we have us as the community steering committee, the city as the project leader. Any questions about the role of the city or the role of the community steering committee before we go on to staff? Go ahead.
After the proposal has been proposed and, say, accepted by the city and accepted by the Strategic Growth Council for funding, who's responsible for implementation? And then does the steering committee then just go away, or are you guys establishing another steering committee to kind of, see the implementation of the projects through?
So if we can hold the second part of the question about actual implementation, let's hold that for the moment, but the portion about the continuing leadership, do you want to address that?
Yes. So one of the requirements of this grant process is that we establish what the state is calling a collaborative stakeholder structure. So what we would imagine is that's going to be the city. It's going to be other agencies and organizations and developers that have projects that are going to be implemented as a part of this proposal. And it's also going to have community organizations or other folks in this room who have been participating in this process to make sure that the implementation of this process going forward is in accordance with what the vision was.
And and I would say, as your facilitator and organizer, you want to make sure here, before your last meeting, you know what the full answer is to that question. So let me ask, we've got a list here. Anybody on that list want to ask questions about the city or the role of the steering committee? So we'll just hit those hands. You keep the list up, but just so we want to stay on theme. Go ahead, here's Mike.
Noelle Riggins is my name. My question is to Mr. H. Spees. This body is supposed to be the deciding factor on the projects that we're putting forward. But Mr. Speed said that the mayor of Fresno will make the decision as to whether or not that is what the city of Fresno wants to go with. Well, what if his idea is different from this body's idea? Is there a process put in place that this body could address the mayor's decision? Because quite frankly, the mayor's decisions have never necessarily benefited West Fresno.
Yeah, Noelle, I would answer that by saying this. A mayor who takes the risk of engaging a process like this that's never been done before would be foolhardy to capriciously disregard the recommendations of people who have shown up again and again, earned the right to vote, and then voted on projects. So the mayor's bought in. Now, in reality, though, we got to be upfront. The mayor's the mayor, and the city is the lead applicant. This body will make recommendations to the mayor. The mayor, though, has to take those recommendations to the city council. So that's a whole other process. And then there's an authority that ends the process, and that is the Strategic Growth Council. The proposal goes to them, and they can either accept or reject the proposal or ask for modifications in projects. So just being completely transparent, that's the way the authority structure goes. We don't anticipate that, and you know, for instance, one of the questions that one of the community leaders asked me early on was, does the mayor have a set of projects in his back pocket and we're just going through this motion? The answer is no. And the only way we're going to prove that is to stay with this process and to look back. When is the project application due? Look back on October 20th when that proposal is submitted, and then you'll be able to really have your answer. Until then, I could say everything that, you know, but that's the way it is.
So actually, not right this second. Well, let me just, I realize, and these are great interrelated questions, that at least, let me ask Danielle to cover staff and project developers. Yep. And then, because many of these questions actually cover multiple topics, and then we'll make sure to clarify all roles. So just cover those two.
Yeah, thank you, Steve. So as H mentioned, the city is playing a very big and significant role, and there are many folks at the city that are very engaged in this process already. Laura was pointed out to you all earlier. Thanks, Laura, for raising your hand again. Laura is in the city manager's office and is really the lead at the city in coordinating all of the city departments and agencies relevant to TCC to make sure that they are engaged in the proposal development process, and that the city will be working with proposers of projects to make sure that they can be in accordance with the state's guidelines. You also have Lupe Perez, who's also working very much on TCC. There are others in the room who I won't put them all out, but they're working very much on this, and you should contact them at any point in the process if you would like to learn more about the city's role. I work for the Central Valley Community Foundation. We were asked by the city to join the TCC effort when there was the initial steering committee that was formed to help staff it. We have now stepped into this role in helping manage the community steering committee process. We are taking this on as a volunteer role. Our board has asked us to take in and step into the community and bring folks together to help bring additional investment into Fresno and the rest of the valley, and so that's why we are here. That being said, we don't want to be the only people over the process up here at the front by the end of this process. So this is a first step, City and CVCF. By meetings number 4 and 5, we hope to have other folks in the community up here because this is a very intense and deliberate community process, and we do want to do it right. Yes, let's talk about project developers, and then let's go to questions. Okay, so, and we will cover more of the project development process in 2 slides from now, but as you know, the city is the lead, and they will be in charge of developing the final proposal. The proposal consists of a series of projects, and projects will come from a lot of different places. And we will cover that in 2 slides, what that process will look like. But it could include developers, community organizations, residents, other agencies within the community, folks that have ideas that want to see them built or produced as a result of this process.
Now we've got a list of folks. The folks who are on the list, anyone have questions about who does what? We just wanted to make sure. So, Lisa, do you have a question about who does what?
As you know, I am a retired planner doing grant administration just like this. My question is the mayor here? No, he left. Oh, darn. Is there going to be a scoring of the projects at a local level after the vote? And is the mayor going to do that, say this is the most viable, this is the one that will solve the issues and the problems, say, for example, in the West Side?
Sure. So, and we'll cover this in more detail later, but I will give you an abridged version now. The state has a long series of criteria, and I'm sure you've looked at the guidelines. Yeah, they're quite elaborate. Yes. So it is the job of this steering committee to figure out how we take projects that are submitted through the community and fit them through the holes of the guidelines to the extent possible in the most creative way that we can. And as a grant writer, you know that there's a lot of creativity in that process.
And I would just say that in reality, after this group has ranked all the projects and put them into a package, there'll be a lot of thought will have gone into it. As H said, the mayor is still the mayor, but what we are hoping the steering committee delivers to the mayor is an integrated package where you've carefully puzzled together the best projects in each area, both thematically and geographically, into an integrated package. So he's looking at it as a whole as well as the pieces. So for folks on the list, anyone else with questions about roles?
I just had a quick question on how you guys formed Southwest, Downtown, and Chinatown. Are you doing that by zip code? Are you doing it by lines? Are you doing it by districts? And how is that outlined? Because I think there's some blur on what some people in this room call Southwest and what is really Southwest. And I think those lines have been blurred. So I think we need a clear understanding of what you guys define that as.
Great question. So we will cover more specifics of boundaries in the project area discussion, but for the purposes of this committee and how we're considering West Side, Chinatown, Downtown, we're considering 93706, 93721, 93701.
So great question over here.
For clarity, for those preparing proposals, to whom do they turn those in?
That is a great question. Maybe we should skip to those slides because
Well, or let's do the. Well, we'll go if it's all right with us. We're cautious about wanting to present too much and then before asking questions. But as Danielle says, it seems like naturally we want to talk about the project development and proposal process. So is it all right if we go forward and present a little bit more of that information and then go ask process? Does anybody have a role-specific question that they want to ask before we go forward in the back?
You guys mentioned you guys had a meeting before this. Was that a public or private meeting? And given how much you guys talked about trust in the beginning, I'm sure that the meeting minutes and the contents and the attendees are going to be available to the body here as well. Thanks.
yes, we will do that.
And it was a public meeting, and all the information will be posted on the website. So, okay, another question on roles before we go forward? Mike?
Oh, I'm sorry.
Lupe is on the way.
Okay.
And then after Mrs. Curry, anybody else who's on the list who's got a roles question? We're just being careful about this to make sure we cover each level carefully. Go ahead.
Given the track record that the city has and has proven for the past, and understanding that 93706 is one of the reasons we're all here, I want to know what do you have in place to guarantee that West Fresno will not be left out as it has been in the past.
Yes. I think there's a couple of things that we're using as a starting point for that. One is that with this process that we have in place and with the participation of folks that are from the west side, woe is us if we develop a proposal that leaves out the west side with this group here to vote on it, right? So I think we are hoping that by setting up this very inclusive path forward that's very different from where we started, that is a first step in helping show that the commitment is there.
Each time we've had a meeting, the guidelines and the committees have all changed. So when will we get a permanent situation where we know exactly what we're working with, what the square miles are, so that people are not spinning their wheels putting together something outside of the square miles that won't be considered later?
Tonight. 100%. And that's why I hope we're not belaboring it, but we're going through stuff step by step, because this is the permanent process. This will be the maps we're going to go over shortly, the permanent maps. And Mrs. Curry is very right. Things have changed several times, so we want to make sure it's totally clear. So, Yep. So I just want, if there's anyone who's on the list who has a roll question, and then we're going to move on. Sir, you're on the list.
My question is it one vote per household, or one vote per business, or is it how? Per person?
Per person. So it's per participating person. So if you want to have multiple people, it's about participation that qualifies you for voting. So if people come and participate, then they can vote. Okay. So what we're going to do to respect the folks who want to ask roll questions, but also to move forward, is let's see what roll questions remain. We got one roll question.
The door for my question.
Okay, so is it
okay?
Okay.
Yes.
So one sec. So we've got you, the two of you, and then I just want to respect. So we're going to take those two, and then we're going to go on to present the information about the project development process.
Okay, you said that everyone has to be here and participate. Now, 93706 is a very large area. I have a business in Chinatown, and I have a home in 93706. I don't see any of my neighbors here. So how far did you saturate the flyers, go out into the community? Because there's a lot of people in the community that I do not see here that represent the fabric of Fresno, of West Fresno. And some of the low-income people don't have transportation to get way out here or to get downtown. Child care, I love that part. But how can we get the people that are in the projects or in the homes down in West Fresno, or in the country as they call it, here so that they can vote? Or can we get someone to become a representative for them to relay all of this information to them and make sure that they can have a voice in this, because they're the reason why this is happening.
100% yes. We should make sure to talk afterwards, and please with Danielle as well. We have done some significant, but not nearly enough outreach yet, and we'll be continuing to do more. Some of the community organizations represented in the room have frankly done the heavy lifting, which we greatly appreciate. So at the end of the meeting, we want to talk about additional means of outreach, and Danielle and I and other staff members are always going to be ready to follow up with people. And certainly things like transportation, whatever other accommodation to make it truly possible, we want to do that. I'm going to take one last question on roles, and then we're going to move forward to development process.
This is regarding the city's role. And H, if you can elaborate on what it means that the city is working to serve this process. In particular, what does it mean to serve this process since you're meeting weekly and we're kind of still figuring out some things? So how are you serving the process at City Hall?
Ultimately, Luisa, a grant is going to have to be written. So we are putting in place the folks that will ultimately be writing this grant. In addition to that, there are some of the projects are going to involve significant questions regarding public works, public utilities, development, And so all of those departments in the city are on standby and are acquainting themselves with all of this so that we don't waste any time. And then finally, as proposals develop, those proposals are going to need support for packaging and inclusion. The state is offering technical assistance, and the city staff will work alongside the state to provide whatever support that we can in those areas that I just mentioned.
I just on something. So, is that team of experts regarding city processes and utilities and public works, are they available potentially to proposal developers that they can access?
Yes.
That's a good segue to the next section
So what
of
we're
the
going
agenda.
to do right now, Danielle is going to talk about the proposal development process. I'm going to talk about the decision-making process. We're getting into some of the dry nitty-gritty, but that's what it's got to be, because if we're going to work together as the committee actually selecting proposals. So please bear with us on all these details. We want to make sure everybody really knows this process.
Great.
Danielle?
Thank you. So we are, with opening up a steering committee for decision making, we are also opening up a project development process to anyone. And through that process, we imagine that there's going to be two different types of projects. So for those of you who are familiar with a lot of the specific and community plans, who was involved here in the Southwest Specific Plan? A lot of hands. Good. Fulton Corridor Specific Plan? Anyone? Couple? Good. Downtown Neighborhoods Community Plan? Okay, good. So all three of those plans have a level of projects, some to more detail than others. Those projects are all projects that could potentially under consideration for funding for TCC. Not all of them will qualify, but some of them will. Then there might be other projects that are not in the community plans, but that might be ideas that you have or folks that you know have. And it could be a community-based organization. It could be an agency that does a lot of work in the community. It could be a developer that has an idea. Those projects will also be under consideration. Both sets of projects will get refined, both through access from the state. The Strategic Growth Council, our funder, is offering technical assistance for folks that are proposing a project. And then the city is also going to make themselves available for consultations for folks to review their projects and to help them develop them. So through that process, and we haven't defined the nuts and bolts of this yet, but throughout the proposal process, and we'll get to dates in a little bit, after we open the call for projects, the city and the state will be available to answer questions and help people develop those projects. After the proposal process closes, we will then have that bucket of projects, let's say it's 200 projects that are submitted through the proposal process, that will all come back to this steering committee.
Go ahead.
Okay, great. So once the bucket of projects, again, let's just use a hypothetical number, 200 projects, once those are all submitted, those will come to this steering committee, and you all will rank those projects. And it may be like versus like, so let's look at all the parks that qualify for funding. How do you rank those? We haven't exactly determined the methodology, but we'll get there. After the ranking, then the projects will be assembled into a couple of different proposals. Again, we're working on a proposal that's a series of different projects. And one proposal that equates to $70 million of funding might have an emphasis on more parks, and another proposal of $70 million might have more of an emphasis on transportation. There might be different types of packages. Those will all come back to this steering committee, and you all will vote on your favorite package. And that's where that 2/3 vote that Steve talked about comes back into play. Once you all vote on the final package of projects that equates to $70 million, that goes to the mayor, which then goes to the city council, which then goes to the state, because we live in a representative democracy, and that is how government works here. So here is our calendar, and you have this in your slides, because I understand it's probably not very easy to see. You might be looking at these dates and seeing that this is a very tight process. Again, this is a grant writing process to the state, so we fall under their timelines. The final concept proposal is due to the state on October 18th. So we're working backwards from there. That's about 7 weeks away. So what we are doing is on August 15th, we are going to release, the city is going to release their call for project proposals, for project concepts. That same day on the 15th and then also on the 16th, we're gonna have 2 workshops, same content, so you don't need to attend both, just attend one or the other. Both will be at night from 5 to 7:30. Those will be everything you need to know about submitting a project. And we'll cover eligibility, what can be funded, what can't be funded. City staff will be there so that you can connect. That will be the opportunity where you get to connect with folks that are working on different projects in the community. That will be the place where you get to connect with, there's a group of residents that are working on building a park here, join that table. Or hey, we all have an idea to create an electric vehicle charging stations in a community in West Fresno, join this table. So that's going to be that time. After the project kickoff workshops, the steering committee will meet a 3rd time, that's this group, on August 30th. That's when we talk about criteria. How are the projects going to be evaluated? What is the state requiring of us to think about when we look at projects? So that's that discussion on the 30th. Then, let's see, September 12th. That's when our call for projects closes. So that's the final time that you have. We're not expecting that by September 12th you have a full, ready, shovel-ready project that's ready to be funded and ready to break ground right away. We know that that's not feasible, but what we're working to do is to get you as far as you can by September 12th, knowing that there's still going to be work done. Wednesday, September 20th, that's our 4th steering committee meeting. That's this body. That's when you rank projects. So that's they're all important meetings, but that is a very important meeting. On Wednesday, a week after that, Wednesday, September 20th, we're having project review day. That's where you get a day where everyone who has proposed a project that's still under consideration, you'll get to interact with them and ask questions. It'll be sort of like a science fair. If we can get the exhibit hall downtown, I think that'd be great to have a huge room where people can interact with people and ask questions about their project and give them feedback. If someone's working on an affordable housing project, ask them questions, figure out, hey, could you put more 3-bedroom units in this housing project? Have you thought about doing that? So that's project review day. Then on Wednesday, October 4th, that's our last community steering committee meeting for the concept proposal process. That's the vote. What we're talking about doing is on Thursday, October 11th, then we take this to the city council for a workshop. We need to educate the city council on what we're doing. They're not going to vote at that meeting. What they're going to do is learn about this process. And then the city after that will submit the final proposal to the Strategic Growth Council after that. The city council will have to vote on this at some point. But there are 2 points in the application. There's a concept proposal where you submit to the state. That's October 18th. But then you still have to submit a full application. That's in November. And the city council will vote before the November submission.
So in a moment, we're going to start with everybody on our list. So now you've got all the pieces of the puzzle. So we want to answer all questions. I just want to emphasize one thing because we are unusually asking everyone to participate and inviting everyone to participate on 2 levels. So on one level, there's a steering committee calendar. We're here tonight starting to get prepared to make decisions. We're going to meet again in several weeks to really develop criteria and start to learn how we're going to make decisions together. Then we're going to have 2 meetings to actually make decisions. That's one calendar. There's another calendar, proposal workshops, weeks to develop your proposals, submitting it, for people who are submitting proposals. You might play both roles, but they are quite distinct. And as you're thinking about the calendar, one of the reasons we're meeting tonight and we're going to meet again before the proposals come in is because then we only have a month to make decisions. And I'm being generous saying a month. So we need to really be ready. At the same time, people are only going to have a month to take their ideas and turn them into submittable proposals. So there's going to be an entire process to support them in doing that. So you're going to have these 2 trains are going to be going simultaneously together so we can make it to that final deadline. So let's respect our list. Michael, who's the first person on the list? So Chirella and then after Chirella, Sabrina. So if we can get a mic to Chirella and to Sabrina. Chirella? Okay, Sabrina, and then who's next? Sabrina, and then Aaron. So if we can get a mic to Aaron too. Who's Aaron? Where are you at? Aaron, Lupe, if we can get a mic to Aaron, he's next. Go ahead, please.
So my question is, do the federal requirements or the state requirements require that this plan align with the general plan for the city or for the Southwest Fresno specific plan? Because that could greatly affect the 5-mile radius.
Yes, alignment, yes, and the guidelines also say that the projects need to be focused in areas where there are recently adopted specific and community plans. It doesn't mean that the project area has to match the boundary specifically, but it does mean that there needs to be consistency in projects that are proposed with the plans.
So within the 3 zip codes that are designated, then how would that 5-mile radius work in alignment? You see where I'm going? So if there's
Sure.
a specific plan and then there's the 3 zip codes,
So
does the
yeah.
Does the 5-mile plan have to be linear, or can it be a wonky shape, or?
We will cover that in the project area discussion of the agenda.
Momentarily. And then Aaron, where are you at, Aaron? Here. And then Roger. Raise your hand, Roger. Roger, if you can get Roger the mic next. Aaron, please.
Yeah, that was part of my question. I wanted to know where the border started and ended.
Okay.
And I didn't understand the answer to the question, like the mayor has the power to say what happens no matter what the vote is what I heard. So when HPs answered the question, I really didn't get the answer to the question. So, I didn't understand.
So we're gonna have a whole section on the boundary. So we'll come back to that. But H, do you have any? And let me, if I may, just add one thing. As someone who organizes these processes, everything in the city, in the end, is decided by the mayor and the council. So there's a crosswalk in front of the church, or there isn't, and actually there needs to be one. That's decided in the end by the city council. But that doesn't actually mean that the engineers and the church who asked for it, the engineers who designed it, are overruled. So I wouldn't overemphasize that this is our work, is all going to be reviewed and changed by the mayor. Everything goes to the mayor, right? I think as a group, as a community, what I think we need to do is come together with enough force and unanimity that it's very difficult for anyone to try to change it. Because we don't have the legal authority. The only one with that is the city council.
So,
right? We have to have the influence by organizing ourselves.
So that you clearly understand my question, does the mayor have the power to make the final decision no matter what the vote is?
Yes, subject to the city council and then subject to the Strategic Growth Council. Well, in other words, the mayor's the mayor, right? So if the city is the applicant, then the mayor has the opportunity to make changes, tweaks, or do whatever he wants with he could say, you know what, I don't like any of this and I'm not going to carry it forward. Now that would kind of be really unfortunate, unwise, and never going to happen, right? But what Steve was saying was just similar to the processes that have gone on prior to this, like the Southwest Pacific Plan. Those planning processes are the way that the city engages the community in owning its own planning. And that's what's happening here. So the mayor is asking for the recommendation of this group of citizens, and will take those recommendations and then take those to the city council. The city council has the authority to mess with it. I just want to be really upfront on that. That's the way representative democracy works when you have a city that's the primary applicant. And then, after the city council says yes, what we anticipate is this group will make a fine decision. The mayor will take that to the city council. The city council will pass it, and it'll be wrapped up in a proposal, and that proposal will go to the Strategic Growth Council, and they'll say, because we've had people watching this process in amazement, they'll say, wow, Fresno's done something spectacular. But I also want to be very realistic that there is power at each of those levels, and it would be disingenuous for us not to acknowledge that. But that's a great question.
Well, and let me take an example, and then I want to go. We've got Roger and then Samuel. So Roger, you got a mic, and then Samuel, we can get a mic to Samuel. Just an example that many of you are familiar with. Recently, the Southwest Pacific Plan Committee recommended to dramatically deindustrialize the Southwest. That decision never would have been made independently by the city, but the committee made it and made it very clearly, and the city is about to, for 98%, adopt that decision. So that was an example of people demanding something different than what would have been proposed by leadership, doing it with unanimity, and in a sense, forcing leadership's hands. That's democracy. But in the end, the mayor and the city council could have said no. They didn't, and in a sense, they didn't have the option, but the community came together to, in a sense, give them no option. So we got Roger, go ahead.
Yes. Going back to what I just want to reiterate what they was just talking about, because if this does happen, it seems like we're wasting our time if the mayor makes that decision, because it's like, where do we go next if he say no, or the council people say no, because you stated earlier, it doesn't have anything to do with the north side or any other side. So they may feel that if we don't get it, well, you're not going to get it. So, you know, it's kind of animosity that goes around in this place. So I just want to say that it's going to be hard work, and we definitely want to know what do we go next when they say no. Because there's some other areas that they zoned out because they changed the zoning of 93706. And half of it, like in this area, they took it out. So when you talk about property and you talk about 93706, that's something that have to be redone, because we lost on that as well.
So I think an important comment more than just a question. So we've got Samuel and then Courtney. Courtney, where are you at? Yep. Courtney's over here, so we can get a mic to Courtney. Does Samuel have a mic? So Lupe, if we can get the next mic over to Courtney. Oh, yeah, he's doing.
So I heard somebody earlier say that the money is going to be issued as a reimbursement. Does the city have a plan to actually have the upfront money so we can make reasonable progress on our progress and just not have the rug ripped out from under us? Because if we go through all this work for money that's going to be reimbursed and we don't have any money up front, how are we going to actually build anything, make progress, and get our reimbursement?
Does someone want to, yeah, Bruce, do you want to take this one? Bruce Rudd, former city manager.
Good evening, everyone. The question is, does the city have the capacity, financial capacity, the cash flow, a number of the projects that may be needed to support what we're hoping is a catalytic set of projects that really transform this area? The answer is yes. We have a number of sources that we've already identified, and HR had mentioned that staff has been working diligently on the last couple of weeks that come up with different ideas to actually provide the upfront funding to support a number of projects. So, for example, in our Public Utilities Department, one of the key initiatives for this is to provide ways to mitigate the environmental impact. So let's talk about groundwater. And we've all gone through a drought for the last 5 years. We have a Purple Pipe or recycled water program already funded. What we are prepared to do is re-strategize or reprioritize projects to literally run recycled water to the project site. We have infrastructure that is aging in this area. We know that it needs to be replaced. So we'll simply reprioritize a lot of those off-site improvements that need to be developed or improved upon in order for a project to pencil out. Transportation is another area that we have funding that we've already tentatively identified. One of the things that's happened with Cap and Trade, for example, and I'm now the interim transit director, and I've spent more of my time in transit and in transportation as almost as much time there as I did in the city manager's office. We have already now identified funding opportunities to augment and extend or provide enhanced public transit services to this particular area. So
I stop you there only because
so that's my 30 seconds. The answer is yes.
So well, we have Courtney and then Lisa. Well, Lisa, where are you? Okay. Okay. Go ahead, Courtney.
Okay, I know you said something like it may be 200 proposals that are submitted, and I'm assuming it's to this group, and you said we would see the proposals, and then they would be ranked, and then we would present that to the city. Now, is there another group that can submit their own proposal directly to the city that we would not even know about?
No.
Okay, so it goes directly here.
Right.
Everyone, it has to come here.
Yes.
Yep.
Okay.
So just, and recognize, so there's real work to be done. Obviously, we're not going to bring everyone 250 pages and say, read it in the next 10 minutes. But these upcoming meetings, we got to go through proposals. You're going to have homework to get ready for a meeting so you can come in and say, I think this park is best and that housing is best, and know why. So, Lisa, question? Lisa, and then we have Kathy. Where you at, Kathy? Okay, if you could be very brief.
Okay, first off, do you know of the implementation grants? There's $1.5 million, which will be divvied out in 10 grants of $250,000. Can that money be utilized to pull out part of the park element to do a park-specific plan? Also, will like proposals be basically bundled to create a better proposal in this process? And also, there seems to be a constriction, a time constriction in regards to lead agencies, because since we have such a short, concentrated timeline here of only 8 weeks, and you're dealing with the city, isn't it behooving to the city to let us know what shelf projects they have that will benefit from this, and at what point will that information be available? And also, guys, get political.
I'll work backwards. At the project kickoff workshops, we will have a discussion of projects that are in the pipeline so that people can understand what's already in development and then have the conversation about new. Your second question about bundling, I think that's a great suggestion, and I think we want to do that. Your first question about the planning grants, that's a state question.
And we'll get back to state questions. So I've got Kathy. Pardon me, I lost you, Kathy. Does everyone get a mic to Kathy? And then after Kathy, Sean, where are you at, Sean? Sean, so if we can get a mic over to Sean Lupe for afterwards. Go ahead, Kathy.
Thank you. Kathy Almachi, Fresno, Chinatown. One of the questions that I had, and this was when you had brought up the issue of the pre-existing plans, the downtown plans, Southwest, and one of the other plans. Chinatown had not been involved in the downtown plan at all. Were never asked to the table. So we attached ourselves to the Southwest plan because Chinatown has identified always as being part of Southwest. But part of this one also, I have a great deal of concern when you're talking about the projects. You're talking about, the street or whatever, the refilling of the electric cars. But I think a lot of people here, including myself, are talking about some real heart kind of questions. If this money is actually going to work with us on our issue of housing, safe housing, streets, safety, jobs, and our health. And if they're not, then tell us so, and we'll leave, because if it's not going to address those issues. And part when you're talking about the Southwest plan, I don't know if people realize how much that was gerrymandered, because the top part of West Fresno was taken out of the West Fresno planning. It was attached to the downtown Fresno plan, which has nothing to do with Southwest Fresno. And so that planning was really gerrymandered.
Do you want to cover the two questions?
I will start with the housing and jobs and health piece of what you said, Kathy. Those are absolutely part of transformative climate communities. They are, and later on in our agenda, we'll cover some of the strategies that the state expects to see as part of our proposal, and all three of those are listed. So take comfort in that. On the Chinatown as part of the plans or not part of the plans, both the Fulton Corridor specific plan and the Downtown Neighborhoods Community Plan include projects that are in Chinatown and an acknowledgement of that. That being said, they're not the be-all and end-all of projects that will be under consideration in Chinatown.
So, and just a quick check, and then we'll go back to our list. I think we want to make sure to save a period of time before people need to leave at 7:30 to be clear about the map, because multiple people have asked about the map, and to hear about the expectations that the state has. So what I'd like to suggest is we'll do 10 more minutes of following the list and answering the questions about our Fresno program to make sure we're all clear as steering committee members. And then we'll take the last 20 minutes for the state expectations. Is that reasonable to everybody? So if we could all be extra succinct. So I've got Sean, right? Go ahead. And then Bob, where are you at? So we get a mic to Bob.
Yeah, Sean Riggins. My father, Pastor Riggins, put about 47 years of his life into West Fresno. There's a street named after my dad in West Fresno. I know people say they understand why people are concerned about the anticipation, and I really hope that this process is really considered. There really is a lot of concern from what's going on and what has gone on in the community. And so just know there is a lot of history here. And there are a lot of our parents and a lot of our families who have given blood and sweat into this community. And that is why we feel this anticipation. And that is why, there's this, I'm going to use a modern saying, my spider senses are tingling. Mm-hmm. There's a lot of anticipation about what's going on. And just know that a lot of our families have put a lot of blood and sweat into the West Side. And we need you guys to know why we are antsy over what has gone on. And, there's a lot of anticipation over this. We have our kids on this side of town dying, and we need these resources. Take that seriously.
Well said. Well said. Bob?
As I understand it, on October 4th, we will be voting on different packages that are kind of theme related. What happens if a project has a really high score but ends up in a transportation package and we vote a parks package, and maybe that project won't get voted in because it's in a package which isn't as popular, and yet it should be because it has a very high ranking. And why is the project review day, why are we ranking projects before the project review day? I don't get that.
Let me start with your first question. A big thing that we should say, and we will keep saying, is that TCC it's $70 million. It's a lot of money, and yet it only goes so far. And so what we hope is that this process is the beginning of a lot more investment. And so that, again, using our hypothetical 200 project number, we get 200 projects, and let's say out of that 10 or 15 get funded. The intent is not to let the rest of the projects just lie on a shelf, but we're going to actively try to figure out, okay, how do we galvanize around more projects and get them funded? So I think, there's intent there to make sure that this isn't a dead end for projects that don't get selected.
And I would just add, Bob's right, these are going to be hard choices. And I think when Danielle says theme, she doesn't mean that the whole package would be parks or another thing. But the intent is it's an integrated package where the different projects synergize and support each other. And so Bob's right, we're not going to be able to take all the ones we like, or it probably wouldn't be smart to just take all the best ones. Just like if you're building a team, you can't just take all the best athletes. You need people for the different positions. Right? So we're going to have to do that together, and the reason we're doing it is because those aren't easy calls, right? We need to do it, we're going to have to do it together.
Right. There is an assumption that not every project after the ranking will still be viable. And so we want to make sure that, if we're going to have a display of the projects, that it's the ones that are still moving on in the process.
We've got Sandra. Sandra, where are you at?
I'm right here.
And just before you speak, who's next? And then Laisha?
Lanisha.
Laisha? Okay, so we'll get you the mic. Go ahead, Sandra.
My question really to H, have the city council members or their staff been invited to these meetings? It may mitigate any changes or challenges down the line if they haven't been invited. So in your effort to facilitate or service this process, maybe some strong encouragement that they join this process. And then my second part is some clarity on the restrictions of the funding from the city out front. So he listed some, what the staff is doing right now to look at potential funding for the match or to support some projects. Chances are that there are some restrictions to them, and so being very clear about the restrictions of those dollars that could be shaping the projects.
So yes, the city council folks know this is going on. They've all been invited. Various ones have shown up at different times, and there's going to be a special workshop way prior to, well, not way prior, because this whole thing is pretty small window, but prior to their decision. So there'll be a workshop where they can weigh in. And by the way, at those times and at the final decision with the city council, all of our folks need to show up and let them know. And it's never too early for you to invite your city council members to be a part of this. Of course, yeah.
On the match and leverage and eligibility question, it's a state question that we are going to work to clarify really clearly at the project kickoff workshops.
So go ahead, and then let's see, Emily, where are you at, Emily? Okay, and then Aparo, where are you at? So we're going to get those two questions, then we'll bring forth the state information and then come back to our list. So go for it.
So of the $70 million, it definitely provides a great opportunity to make a huge impact, to essentially fund a great number of the projects that are proposed. My question is there a cap on the allocation for, or the percentage allocated to administration? Because for programs like this, we have seen all too often that here we would have a lump sum of money that, like, for example, CDBG, and it's allocated more to administration and public works and police. So, and then leaving the intended, the purpose or the intent of the project with limited.
Mm-hmm. Right. That is a state guidelines question that I do not know the answer to right now, but we can clarify that
in a few moments. We'll have the state director helping to answer state questions, so we'll come back to it. So we've got Emily and then Aparo. Can we get a mic back to Aparo? Thank you. Emily?
Thank you. I have two things I'm thinking about. One is the idea that the guidelines by SGC are really written to benefit this particular area. So the northwest area is not going to qualify. So I don't think we really need to worry so much about that. If Mayor Brand makes changes, wouldn't it be very likely that the SGC would say, no, you guys have to rework this. This is not following the guidelines. Is that possible?
So I think would the SGC do that? In a moment, the SGC can kind of answer how they will interact with the city. And I think that's clearly something that's why we're all here. If it was absolutely clear where the money would go,
right. We're all
we
worried.
wouldn't need to have 300 of us in a room.
Right.
The reality is it's a complex set of guidelines that reflect a lot of different politics. That's why it's so important that we're all vigilant and follow this process all the way through, because we're part of those politics, and we got to make sure to express ourselves.
Okay. Yes,
So-
I had one other thing,
you-
and it relates to the labor that and the companies. Are there any restrictions set in these guidelines? Because as I understand it, they're not completely finished with being formulated, that would give priority to companies and to individuals who live in the area that needs to be served. Thank you.
I'm going to defer that question to our state colleagues to be more specific.
So, Paro, go ahead, and just before you answer your question, so these are all totally on target questions, and I'm sure everybody has more. Danielle, myself, Laura, all the staff members, we really need to interact one-on-one in the coming weeks, because if you're going to be effective steering committee members, you need all your questions answered. So we are quite literally available to sit down one-on-one, and in a lot of cases, we're going to call you and ask to sit down one-on-one, because it's just like you're a member of Congress, you got to get prepared. So we're clearly not able to answer everything, but these are exactly the questions we want to answer, and the question that comes after and after over the coming weeks, so everybody gets ready. Amparo, last question?
Hi, I'm Amparo Cid. I just wanted to comment briefly on something that happened a few minutes ago. I'm concerned when Mr. Spies says that the mayor is the man, and when Steve, you mentioned the legalities of things. As a California attorney, I think that those things around what is legal, what's illegal should be left to attorneys and not to folks that don't have a JD behind their name. Secondly, I would just like to say to the community that this is a public process. The reason why folks are here in Southwest today is because the community spoke and advocated. So although there is a timeline on what process will be followed, know that your voice is important throughout this entire area. Secondly, this is state of California dollars. So this is your community, your voice matters, make it heard. Thank you.
Right. Well said. Okay, so now I'm going to ask Danielle, and then after Danielle, H, and the director of the State Strategic Growth Council, Ken Alex, to speak all very briefly. You guys have 8 minutes altogether, so we still have 10 minutes to have questions, because I think there's going to be critical questions. So if everyone can be succinct.
Yes, you have the clicker. Thank you. Okay, so we are going to cover as much as we can in a short period of time about some of the state's expectations for this program. We're going to start with project area because we know there's a lot of questions here. So I'm going to do my best to walk you through a series of maps that help walk through what the state requires and how that looks in the guidelines and what that looks like on a map. And then after I get through the next 5 maps, then we can talk about that, okay? Okay. So, well, I have to point this way. My bad. First, City of Fresno. This money is coming to the city, not to the county, not to county islands, City of Fresno. So if property is in the City of Fresno, it's eligible. If it's not in the City of Fresno, it's not. Pretty straightforward. Next, there are these light purple areas on the map of the city. These are the census tracts that are within the top 5% of the most disadvantaged communities in the state of California. This is using a metric that is called CalEnviroscreen. It's a compilation of several different indicators that look at both environmental factors as well as socioeconomic factors in a community. So as you can see, there are many census tracts in Fresno that are in the top 5% of the most disadvantaged communities in California. This is about 40% of the city's area are in the top 5% of the most disadvantaged communities. This is one of the reasons why Fresno was chosen by the state to receive this money, because there's a lot of parts of town. So this is another factor that the state considers in how you determine where the funds go. Okay, third factor, specific and community plans that are recently adopted. So on this map, you have the blue line, that is the Southwest Specific Plan, that is scheduled to be adopted by the Fresno City Council in October. The green is the Fulton Corridor Specific Plan that was adopted last October in 2016. And the yellow, and I realize the yellow is very light, my apologies, that's the Downtown Neighborhoods Community Plan. It includes both the downtown core, which most people consider the triangle, as well as the historic neighborhoods around downtown, both including some of the neighborhoods in Southwest as well as Lowell, Jefferson, Yokomi, and then some Southeast neighborhoods as well. So what the guidelines say is they want the investments in Fresno to focus on areas that have recently adopted local community and specific plans. It doesn't mean that all of the money has to be spent in that area, but a lot of it does. It needs to be focused, and we define what that means. Okay, so that's another layer that we have to consider. Next, I'm skipping ahead. There we go. Next layer. So in the middle of the green, you'll see that dark blue line. That's where the high-speed rail station is going. It will be under construction, the actual station, in a few years. And the dotted line around that is what is considered the high-speed rail station area. So that is another thing that is listed in the guidelines that needs to be considered in the Fresno proposal and have some investment around the station area. Okay. Last thing that the state guidelines refer to in terms of project area is that the total area of oh, sorry. I'm not good with the clicker. There we go. Nope. Okay, my bad. So the last thing is 5 square miles. The total area where projects can go is 5 square miles. This is a sample box. This is an arbitrary placement. This is an example. This is not the project area that we have defined. That's the work of this community to define this project area, and that's going to be defined where the projects get selected. So we have to focus. It can't be all of the purple. It can't be all of the area within the blue and the green. It has to be 5 square miles, which is not huge. It is the work of this committee through our project development process to select projects that meet all of those different thresholds. Is it in the most disadvantaged communities? Is it in the recently adopted specific plan areas? Does it cover some high-speed rail station area projects? Once we hit those check boxes, we then draw a 5 square mile boundary around that, and that becomes the project area.
So respecting everybody's time, I actually would like Ken and H to come up and join us. The topic that comes next is what's fundable, and that's really fundamentally the focus of our next workshops. So I want to make sure together we completely cover this map question because it's really central. So Ken, is there anything you'd like to add about the map question?
So if you don't mind, I'd like to talk for a few minutes. I drove 3.5 hours, and I'm going to drive 3.5 hours back tonight. So I think if people are willing to stay for 10 or 15 extra minutes, I would appreciate it. Okay. Because I think it's important.
So that they ask. Because it's really important that we do things together, and then that we also talk next steps. So how many people here are willing to stay until 7:45? You staying to 7:45? Okay. Okay. Go ahead.
I'll introduce myself, please. So my name's Ken Alex. I'm a senior policy advisor to Governor Brown. I'm the director of the Office of Planning and Research. And because Governor Brown is a cheapskate, I have a third job, which is that I'm the chair of the Strategic Growth Council, which you've heard about a fair amount tonight. So first off, I want to thank whoever made this beautiful space available. And I hugely appreciate the engagement of folks from this community and from Fresno. It's not a usual thing. I think you should take some pride in the fact that you care. I go around the state a fair amount, and it's not always the case. So thank you for being here. I don't want to talk at you too long, so I will be quick, and I know that H wanted to ask some specific questions because he knows a lot more about some of your concerns than I do, but I want to give you a quick overview of some of your perspective depends on where you sit. If you live in the Southwest, you have a different view than I do. I sit in the state. I have some needs that I'm, some of which are dictated to me and some of which the state has overall. And I want to share that with you because it does create constraints and there are some limits. So I want people to be aware of some of that. Look, this is a really unique program. I think it's the only one in the country like it, where there's a significant amount of money going to a very focused area of disadvantaged communities in particular cities. Fresno's getting $70 million. Some area of Los Angeles, which is a lot bigger than Fresno, is getting $35 million. And there'll be a third location as well. So we want to figure out how to make this a success so that we can do more of it. And also because it's important to be successful and make this work. So there's accountability for spending $70 million, as you can imagine. So some of the rules are about that accountability. But one thing that everybody should be aware of is that the money comes from something called it's a greenhouse gas reduction fund. That means that it's connected to climate change, and it's connected to the state's effort to reduce emissions from greenhouse gases. Now, the reason that we have a lot of flexibility within that, not unlimited, but a fair amount, is that it turns out that if you build housing near transportation, if you build public transit, if you build things like bike lanes and pedestrian walkways, and you do solar energy, and you have infrastructure that's about reducing emissions, all of those things reduce overall greenhouse gases. At the same time, some of the other aspects of this are to help improve health of the community and to address issues of social equity. So we're trying to do a lot of things, but the greenhouse gas piece is one of the limiting factors about the types of projects that can be funded. So that will be an interest that the state has. And somebody asked, will the Strategic Growth Council have a voice in making sure that the projects are consistent with that if the mayor or somebody else goes in a different direction? The answer is yes, with those set of criteria. In addition, clearly a lot of the tension around this discussion that I've had the privilege of hearing a lot of today and also in the past from Randall Winston and Daniela and some of the other folks who work for the state on this set of issues. A lot of the tension is around where the money is going to be spent in the Southwest, in Chinatown, downtown. The state's interest is twofold here. First, we have a lot of investment with the high-speed rail, with the Fulton Mall. We need to make sure that those investments come to fruition, and some of this money may be beneficial to moving forward with the benefits of those investments, which we think has benefit for all of Fresno. Having said that, the state has an interest in it, as I said, in issues around social equity and fairness, and we think that, and I can't prejudge the decision, I'm one of 10 decision makers ultimately, but I will say that the broad interest of the state includes connectivity between downtown and the Southwest. And that's both literal and figurative. So literally, I know there's a bus rapid transit route. That's really important, and I think it's important to see if there are other ways to create connectivity and transportation options. And I also think that there are some more figurative connections that need to be made. We've had some discussions, and I know you are all thinking seriously about the potential for having a community college campus located in the Southwest. Well, that would create some really interesting connections between the Southwest community and the rest of Fresno and downtown in particular. So the state is very interested in seeing that developed, and we will continue to be so without prejudging the outcome. So H, if you have some particular questions, I'm happy to try and answer them. I'm going red here.
Not more than 5 minutes, so then we have time for...
Yep. Just real quick, let's talk about where the money can be spent. So as the mayor looks at this and has looked at, and we've looked at the 89 pages of the recent guidelines and what have you, we've come up with this map. And the map basically says that we are going to, number one, see millions of dollars. The mayor hasn't put any quota on that, but millions of dollars are going to be spent in Southwest Fresno, in Chinatown, and in downtown. And that the mayor's going to pay a lot of attention to the projects that were outlined in the Southwest Specific Plan, like the State Center Community College and the downtown Fulton Corridor Plan, and that there will be other projects that are generated from the community. Does that work for you?
So here's the thing I should have said in my remarks. The $70 million, even $105 million if you count the 50% match, is not enough money. I think we all recognize that. It's not going to, by itself, change the Southwest or the downtown or Chinatown. So the question is, how do we both focus that investment and use it as leverage to get a substantial amount more? The state is committed to getting more. We've been talking with foundations, with businesses, with banks, et cetera. So that's a piece of this. But in addition, the idea of this program is to be as focused as possible. And so there's a connection, as I mentioned, to high-speed rail, which I think most of you are aware of. But it also is important from the state's perspective to have some limits on the project area. So for example, if it's all of Fresno, $70 million is nothing. So if it's a 5-mile square, which is not, by the way, ironclad, but it's approximately 5-mile square, or that doesn't even have to be square, then we think that that's a better way to get value out of the investment. Having seen this set of constraints, that is consistent with what the guidelines are saying, and there is some leeway in how this is designed, but it does cover chunks of the Southwest, downtown, and Chinatown.
Beautiful. Okay. And then in an earlier conversation that we had, you talked about, this is a unique project. Nobody else is doing it, and we've got a unique process. Nobody else is doing this. And so you're in conversation with other pots of money. Could you just share a little bit about that?
Yeah, so I mentioned foundations. We're hopeful that we'll get foundations to participate, given the unique nature of this. We're talking with other state agencies about pots of money that they may have. So there may be some workforce development dollars. SB1, which we're all going to be paying some gas tax around. Hopefully, part of the state's interest here is to tie together different pots of money and see if we can extend and expand the possibilities. And if you have ideas for how to do so, we're very interested. And maybe some of the companies that are coming into Fresno, maybe they have some interest in helping this process as well, and we'd like to encourage that.
My mic is not cooperating. If I can borrow yours. Can please stay up with us. Okay, so we have 16 minutes left. We're going to save 2 minutes at the very end to cover next steps and make sure we're all 100% clear on the calendar. So now we want to go back to our list. Is Marshawn next, or is that okay? Marshawn, where are you at, Marshawn? And then just so we have Noelle, you're here. So a mic to Noelle. Of course, any and all questions, but I really want to make sure we don't leave without total clarity on the map. So if there's any questions about the map and we're starting to run out of time, raise your hand and say, hey, we need to cover this because we want to make sure everyone knows the map. Go ahead, Marshawn.
Well, I want to make sure that, what I'm coming here for is to be also looking at this as a grant writer and also as having some ownership in this. And the financial capacity was already addressed by the city manager. But the thing is that, what about the employers and the talent that's going to be the infrastructure that is going to be, behind some of these plans, because we don't need another park. If I'm coming up here, and I'm speaking, I own 4 businesses. So therefore, some of those are nonprofit, some of those are construction, union, they're different diversifications, and I don't see anything saying that how is that going to create jobs? How is that going to, bring out that talent? Because there's a lot of people here that has a lot of education, a lot of technical experience that could, serve the interests of how you want to develop and shape this plan. But if you want to be a grant writer, I'm looking for support as far as how we can be a better grant writer and how those employers and people that have that kind of education can benefit from this.
Absolutely. So a couple of things. One thing we should definitely mention, there is a project labor agreement that the city has adopted, the city council adopted in December, that includes a local hire agreement as part of these funds, tied to the funds. So any projects that are included in this package that are not related to housing will have a 50% local hire attachment to that. So that's one way in which these funds are hoping to start getting folks in the community involved on the job side. Another is that there's an emphasis in the guidelines, and they certainly mention it, about working with small business contractors and small businesses and trying to get those opportunities out to them, and also businesses of color. And so we haven't figured out how to do that, but I know that that's something we should definitely explore.
Daryl Muhammad brought up this very issue at the meeting at St. Rest, and so we went inside the city. We looked at our DBE process, our Disadvantaged Business Enterprise process, and we are working with the Fresno Metro Black Chamber, the Hispanic Foundation, and folks in the community to really get serious about making sure that we leverage not just projects in West Fresno, but also that there be access to the jobs for contractors and companies that would normally not be able to jump into that circle.
Well,
Marshall, I want to respect you, but just
I
10
just wanna
seconds
add
so
just
we
10
respect the
seconds
other
to that.
folks.
But like you said, it's always an aspiration and not an attainment when you're talking about the DBE, because I am a certified DBE. I am a small business certification through the state of California, as well as, I am a local union contractor, general contractor, and I don't be utilized. So I just want to know how you're going to be able to bridge that.
So I think this dialogue is a critical example. We're not going to finish a lot of topics tonight. None of us on the staff are going anywhere at the end of the meeting or in the coming months. So let's continue these afterwards, and we'll definitely follow up on this one. Anyone else interested in local hire, let's make sure to talk over here in the corner afterwards. Noelle, and then Kate. Where are you at, Kate?
Okay.
Get a mic to Kate.
Very quickly. I'm curious if the city of Fresno is going to be charging consultation and administrative fees for the work that they're doing. Secondly, I would like to know if we can get a commitment. Mr. Spees is acting on behalf of the mayor. If we can get a commitment from the mayor and the city council to hold their deliberations in open council so that those of us from the community can be there when they're making those deliberations. Thirdly, this gentleman drove 3.5 hours here. We could have spent the entire meeting talking to him.
So just importantly, the reason we didn't is because the work at hand isn't about talking to Ken. It's actually about us getting ready to talk to each other. That's the hard part that's going forward. So that was very much on purpose. Also why we didn't have Ken come up earlier, because we want us to get used to talking to each other. H, do you want to just briefly speak to Noelle's points about open process?
It will be open.
All right. So we've got Kate, and then after Kate, Bo. Where are you at, Bo? Bo? Where's Bo? Oh, over here. Okay, I didn't look like Bo there. So, but you'll get you on the list, Mrs. Currier. You on the list? So Bo will go next. Go ahead, Kate.
Yes, thank you. I actually had that same question, if there was going to be any public view into those decision meetings, so I'm glad to know that that's the case. Couple of bullet point questions. So who can submit projects? Is it individuals, companies, public entities, nonprofits? And hold on, because I have a couple questions.
So actually, you should ask your first question, because we got to give other people a chance. So
okay. Well, I was just going to say, do size and scope make a difference in the consideration? And how specific do the proposals have to be? Because I'm thinking about the woman that was sitting over there saying, she's not seeing a lot of her neighbors. If there were resources to go out to these different communities that are being represented and have subgroups and they can submit a proposal, how formal does it have to be? If you don't have business experience in this kind of thing, will all proposals be looked at and reviewed equally? Thank you.
Yeah, that's a great topic for the project kickoff workshops to take on in more detail. The short answer is that proposals can come from anyone, and that we are going to do our best to match people who have great ideas with people who can actually get them done.
And it also just points out, it's clear, there's a ton to talk about who's going to do the proposals, what exactly kind of help are you going to get, where's that help going to be physically. That's all what that next workshop is about. Tonight was about us getting to become a group so we can make decisions together in the future. Those project workshops will be about getting anybody ready to actually propose a project. Bo? Bo, and then Henry. Where are you at, Henry? Henry?
So my statement in question is around the calendar. We started out talking about building trust, and we started out talking about congressional type formation that we were taking. I would like to support a reconciliation process where if the mayor decides that something needs to be changed or that is something that he doesn't want, as the calendar is right now, there's no time to have a reconciliation process. So we have Ken here now. Is it possible to push back the concept proposal date so that we have time to hold that reconciliation Congress?
So this is one of those constraints that I'm under. We extended this by a month because we realized it was crazy to do this in 3 weeks. The problem that I have is that the legislature, the governor, others really want to get this money out and working. And they actually wanted it to be done in 2017, and we had a plead to get 30 days to go into 2018. So as much as this is, my staff has the same view as you, which they'd like some more time, but I pushed as hard as I think I can push to push it out to have 7-week period. So I apologize for that, but we're the guinea pigs, and we have some marching orders on this.
But we'll work internally to see what's possible, because point well taken, and that's a tradition, reconciliation. So we'll work on that, because the last thing we want to do is have anything change at the final minute and you hear about it in the B. So that's a very good point. So we've got Henry, Henry, and then Rodney. Okay, go ahead, please, Henry.
Yeah, thank you. Now, I understand there's going to be a total of 5 community meetings, and the comments and really which are questions I hope are answered in the next 5 meetings. The first is, we started the meeting with the issue of trust. Okay, and I think there's a lot of folks here today because there was a process that was closed to the community until we started this community engagement process, which is good. Mr. Alex, I think you made the best point of all. I, along with the former mayor, probably the biggest high-speed rail supporters in this community. And now if the governor would have knocked on your door and said, spend $70 million at the high-speed rail station on Fulton Mall to keep the project going, there'd be nobody in this room, and I'd be with you 100%. The problem, I think, is that you used the zip code to justify the allocation of the money, and we created an initial process that excluded West Fresno. But I'm glad to see that the area's been expanded. There's now more community input. But I think, even though I understand the pressure of the governor and the legislature to get this money allocated, you have to do it right. And I think maybe right is if you take that $70 million and maybe cut it in half and dedicate half of that money to West Fresno, because they're tired of toxic waste dumps as parks for their kids, rendering plants, and everything else that goes with it. And I think it's time to say, okay, let's take half of this money and let's work with you and maybe move this criteria, because it's not set in stone yet, and work with them in ways that they can get that match. Like what Bruce suggested. I think what Bruce was suggesting is possibly using city monies as in-kind contributions. So I think there's time to that. The other point I'll make is just going back to the voting. I think that's a recipe for disaster the day you come to vote. When you go to this door, if we're here, and you tell somebody you can't vote because you only came to 1 meeting, or you only came to 2, and you're looking for a half or 2/3 participation, depending on 5 meetings. I don't know how you divide that up, and I don't know who keeps score. So there's a trend in this country not to let people vote or discourage people from voting, and I think that's exactly what this is. Let people vote if they want to vote the day that these projects come forward.
So let's say that at our next community steering committee meeting, we can have a a thorough discussion of what voting rules we want to use, because it's really important before we get to voting that we all decide together how we want to vote. So Henry, we should talk more before, but then let's have a thorough discussion of that. On the first point, Nicole, Ken, anything you want to say on Henry's first point? If not, Rodney, and then to respect everybody, we're going to take 2 more questions after that. Then we'll make sure to talk about next steps, and then we'll all be here to answer questions. So we have Rodney and then Alan. Where are you at, Alan? Alan? Okay, so we got Alan after Rodney. Rodney?
Yes, I understand it's a reimbursement program. I'm assuming it's 100%. If not, what is the rate of the reimbursement? And then at the end of the day, if any of these approved projects are deemed to be underfunded, who's going to pick up the difference? Is the city willing to foot the difference?
I can't answer the question about 100% reimbursement. And Bruce, do you want to take on the question about the city's role, or do you want to?
So the answer on the reimbursement is that anything that will be approved will be reimbursed.
Okay.
So here, we should make sure not to have a discussion that everybody can hear. So the first one, just to clear on reimbursement, when that's used in the terms that the state is not writing a check ahead of time, rather the state is taking submittals of qualified expenses and then paying them. That's why we call it reimbursement. So you have to have the money to spend, and that's one of the key roles of the city,
But
to
these
have
are all
that money.
projected costs. and
Correct,
it-
right.
and
So
it
then a
can
separate,
change.
separate question is, the gentleman asked, what if a project goes over budget? What happens with that gap? Does anyone like to address that? No one wants to address the over expenditures. So I think I would say briefly that that's another reason why the city is a lead applicant, because they have to demonstrate that they have the capacity to manage multi-million-dollar projects simultaneously and bring them in on budget and on time. And that's not an easy thing to do. And that's why someone who has that track record has to be the applicant. So we've got, who's next? I'm sorry. So we've got Alan, and then is Lee next? Alan, and then Lee, and then Mrs. Curry, you can ask the last question.
Looking at the calendar, the call for proposal concept closes at 5 p.m. on Tuesday, September the 12th. Who receives the proposals?
This will go to the city.
Where in the city?
We will have more details at our project kickoff workshops.
Good question. So, Lee, where are you at, Lee? I'm sorry, I didn't see you. Oh, hi, Lee. So get pass the mic to Lee, and then Mrs. Curry will have her last question. And if everybody could stay with us for 2 more minutes, I want to make sure no one leaves without knowing the next steps.
Ken, I'm with Tree Fresno, and we've planted trees throughout the area, and we're very aware of the limited canopy that we have. My question for you is that given the blight that surrounds the downtown area, and given that we have many sources of pollution throughout the downtown area with the railroads, with the highways, and everything that goes on, is there potential that this program over time could reach out around the downtown area and go out over several years?
Yeah, so assuming that we're successful, and we can have another meeting about what success means, my hope is that the legislature will see fit to extend this program, and that this will not be the only year that we have money to spend. There will be many cities and disadvantaged communities that will want to do this, and you're the first. But I think that it's important, if we are successful and we have a community that knows how to do this and shows the way, that we have the potential to come back and do more.
So, Mrs. Curry, final question, and then H is just going to close us on next steps.
Before I have the question, I want to thank you, Mr. Alex. You've made a meeting very meaningful, your enlightenment. Thank you. My question is to Mr. Spees and the city people. I noticed there are a lot of meetings lined up, no dates, no places. I mean, dates, but no places. Will the notices be out in time for people to know where the meetings are, and will they be open and ample time and ample notices, not just in the B, and not only people who have email or whatever they do with all that electronic stuff. Not just those people, but everybody else.
Yep. So H, when you come up, and that's a perfect segue to next steps.
Thank
And
you.
then, since we'll close, please, if you have other questions, come up and talk to any members of the staff or members of the community who've spoken up, because this should be the first of many meetings of us working together.
Well, I too wanted to thank Ken Alex and Danielle Simonovic for coming. Thank you for being here. Let's thank him. Danielle, as you reflect on next steps, what do you have to say to folks?
A couple of things. I want to answer Mrs. Curry's questions about location, and we have not confirmed our location for our next meeting, and we will do so as soon as possible. Our hope is to always have it be as comfortable and accessible as Westside Church of God. May not always be Westside Church of God in the future. And I know a lot of our meeting notices have been digital, and we're going to try to do more other types of media in the future. So that is on our to-do list, Mrs. Curry. In terms of next steps, who has the clicker for me? Do you have it, Steve? Thank you. Sorry. Okay. Oops. So, if you want to work on a project or have a really awesome idea and want to connect with someone who can help you implement your idea, attend the project proposal kickoff workshops. There's going to be two, one on the 15th of August, one on the 16th of August, both at night, 5 to 7:30. We'll send out locations as soon as we have them. The same content will be at both, so you don't have to attend both, just one or the other. Read the draft Transformative Climate Communities Guidelines. It's that link. That's all of the ways in which we understand state expectations come from that document. It's the 4th version. They will be adopting the final version of the guidelines on August 24th in Sacramento. You have a copy of the guidelines on your chair. Everyone should have a copy of that, so if you don't access it online, it's there. We'd also encourage you to catch up on your local community and specific plans, Southwest specific plan, Fulton Corridor specific plan, and the Downtown Neighborhoods Community Plan. And then finally, please come to our next steering committee meeting on August 30th, where we will be talking about criteria for selection. Thank you all.
Thank you very much for coming. Since we didn't have time for an outreach discussion, if people have outreach ideas, please come talk to Danielle and I afterwards. And thank you very much for your time tonight. Look forward to the next meeting.